The Me and Mrs. Jones singer passed away over the weekend at the age of 81.
Moore died Friday morning in Florida due to complications while recovering from surgery.
They sold millions of records. They burned their hearts out on stage. They were icons of their time. But now, no one remembers their names. Was this a historical accident or a deliberate selection? How many black singers have been forgotten simply because they no longer fit the white standards of the music industry? Would their names be etched into the wall of fame if they had different skin? It's not an easy question to answer, but you'll have to watch this video to see the list of people who were once the lights of music, but are now unjustly swallowed into the shadows. Here are 23 black R&B legends who disappeared without you knowing. Who do you think deserves to be brought back to life? 23. Johnny Ace, the artist who died because of a joke too far. He was one of the first bright faces of R&B in the 50s. Johnny Ace's sweet and powerful voice once made millions of hearts flutter with the hit Pledging My Love. His name once resounded throughout the stages of the southern United States, but that brilliant career only lasted a few short years, then suddenly ended. Johnny's death did not take place on stage, but backstage, on Christmas Eve 1954, an incident that, until now, the elderly still recall with a feeling of discomfort, obsession, and regret. That night, Johnny was performing at the City Auditorium in Houston, Texas, after the show. He went backstage to rest, chat with friends and lovers. Christmas was coming, and the atmosphere in the dressing room was filled with laughter and congratulations. A moment later, Johnny pulled a pistol from his pocket. Some say he played Russian roulette, shooting himself in the head with a single bullet. Others say he was just showing off the gun, or pretending to be amused. But the shot rang out. Johnny Ace collapsed on the spot. Blood stained the tile floor. No one had time to intervene. He died at the age of 25. A witness at the time, singer Big Mama Thornton, is still haunted. She recounts that Johnny had no intention of killing himself. He was just reckless, adventurous, and had a habit of carrying a gun like a toy. But that trigger took away a young talent at the moment when he was at his brightest. Thousands of people flocked to Johnny's funeral. The radio played his love songs on repeat all week, but after his sudden death, his name was gradually erased from the flow of history. It was as if he had never existed, just a vague name on an old record. Johnny's death is a bitter reminder that sometimes the life of a genius is more fragile than we think, and that a foolish joke, a lack of awareness, or a moment of unconsciousness can end it all. Live carefully. Love yourself as Johnny's voice loved every song. We cannot relive the past, but we can retell it, so that no one is coldly forgotten. 22. Sam Cooke. The American soul icon collapsed in a strange room. He was once called the father of modern soul. Sam Cooke was more than a voice. He was an icon. He brought black music to the American public, was the first person to start a record company to gain autonomy, and was the voice for freedom for people of color in the violent 60s. With songs like A Change Is Gonna Come, he lit a fire in the hearts of an entire generation. But on the night of December 11, 1964, Sam Cooke was found dead on the floor of a cheap motel in Los Angeles, naked, shot in the chest, and no one could explain what had happened. The official account said that Cooke had chased a girl into the motel, behaved violently, and was shot dead by the manager in self-defense. But so much didn't add up. Sam was a gentleman, always dressed in a sharp suit, dark glasses, and a confident smile. Why was he in a shabby place, with a strange girl, nearly naked? Why had his possessions disappeared? Why was there no further investigation, when friends and family insisted that this was not the kind of man he was? It was a death that was shelved too quickly, as if someone didn't want to talk about it anymore. Singer Etta James saw his body and said, he was covered in bruises. His teeth were broken. It didn't look like self-defense. It looked like he had been assaulted. But her words were dismissed as a whisper. The media were silent. Those who had shared the stage were confused and scared. Sam Cooke was murdered, but the killer was never officially named, and so he disappeared, not just from the stage, but from the public conscience. Remember, great voices never die. They are silenced by power, by prejudice, by stories no one dares to dig up. Sam Cooke's death took not just one man, but an entire movement away from its most powerful voice. And to this day, he remains a symbol of an unfulfilled dream. Do you remember him? And have you ever wondered who was allowed to live and who was silenced? 21. Joe Tex, the lonely clown nobody understands. He was a Southern sensation, a dynamic, passionate performer who sang and danced, laughed and quipped, a James Brown-esque comedy act. But unlike Brown, Joe Tex was not given the respect he deserved. He had huge hits like Skinny Legs and All, I Gotcha, and Hold What You've Got. He challenged the black music industry with his gritty Southern accent and straightforward lyrics. But beneath that fun exterior was a lonely soul, a heart broken by alienation and misunderstanding. Joe Tex always felt left out. James Brown stole his band, and for a long time, he was forced to sing in a commercial mold. He tried to laugh to hide his sadness, but people didn't laugh with him. They laughed because of him. After years of neglect, he returned to his hometown of Navasota, Texas, to live as a recluse. There, Joe Tex was no longer an artist. He became a Muslim. He changed his name. He avoided the limelight. Those who knew him said that Joe often walked around town, dressed simply, and talked to children more than adults. There was no longer any aura in his eyes. There was only resignation and weariness. The last time Joe Tex appeared in public was at a small meeting at a local church. He sang an old song, no background music, no microphone, just his bare voice. Some say that when he got to the line, "Tell her I'm sorry," his voice broke. He stopped singing mid-sentence, stepped off the stage, and walked straight out. A week later, he suffered a heart attack and died in his home. No big funeral, no media coverage, no mention. Joe Tex is the epitome of a misunderstood talent. He wasn't small, he was just too real. And when a person is too real, sometimes they have no place in the fake world of showbiz. His story is a wake-up call for those who have laughed instead of listening, sometimes. Behind a laugh is a soul just trying to survive. Be kind to people you don't understand, because sometimes they are hurting in ways you can't see. 20. Garnet Mims, the man who never found himself. He once sang a song that made the audience fall silent. His song, Cry Baby, is a pain woven into his voice. Garnet Mims was not a big hit, but for true soul lovers, he is a treasure, born in church music. He brought the cry of gospel to popular music and paved the way for generations to come. But after his early success, he almost disappeared. No noise, no scandal, no one mentioned. Garnet had a great future, but he hated the spotlight. He was not a good negotiator. He did not like fame. After a brief rise, he was caught up in bad contracts, lost control of his music, and was replaced by singers who sold more records. He retreated. Sometimes he lived in poverty. Sometimes he wandered from state to state, searching for meaning. He tried to come back in the 80s, but the times were no longer conducive to his old, soulful voice. He was last seen performing at a homeless center in Philadelphia, where he had come to do charity work. He was not on a big stage, but on a makeshift wooden platform. He sang without lights, without titles, just listeners. And when he sang, Cry Baby, the homeless stood up and applauded silently. One middle-aged black woman burst into tears. Then he walked down, holding hands with each one. Not introduce himself, not mentioning the past. Garnet Mims did not disappear. He melted into the songs he sang for the poor, the abandoned, the forgotten. He did not need to be famous. He needed to be loved in the right way. Perhaps. Sometimes the saddest thing is not being forgotten, but that no one ever understood you, even when you were alive. And perhaps, living kindly is the way he chose to continue to exist after all the losses. Do you think that the people who live the quietest are the ones who leave the longest-lasting impression? 19. Billy Paul, the one-song man. He is the embodiment of the difference in R&B music, with an extraordinary voice, a blend of jazz and soul. Billy Paul once took America's breath away with the song Me and Mrs. Jones. The love song about an illicit love affair became a legend, climbing to the #1 position on Billboard in 1972 and bringing him a Grammy. But after that shining halo, Billy Paul almost disappeared. No scandal, no farewell, no second hit, just a silence that lasted for decades, and people began to call him the one-song man. Few people know that the song that made his name was also the song that tied his life to prejudice. Billy once shared that after Me and Mrs. Jones. Record labels just wanted him to repeat the formula, but he wanted to sing about justice, about racism, about homosexual love, topics that were too sensitive at that time. He released the album Let's Make a Baby, which was censored. He recorded the song Am I Black Enough for You, which was banned from the airwaves. He became a name that the music industry did not want to be associated with, and gradually, he was pushed into the shadows. The last time Billy Paul appeared in public was at a small performance in Philadelphia, his hometown. It was not a big stage, just a community program. People say that when he sang Me and Mrs. Jones. The audience was no longer young, but they were as silent as when they first heard it, after the show. He sat alone backstage for a long time. No manager, no reporters, only a few audience members came to take pictures. A boy asked him if he had any new songs. He smiled, shook his head, and said, "No need for new songs if people never understood the old ones." Billy Paul died in 2016 of pancreatic cancer. There was little press coverage, there was no lavish ceremony, but he left behind another legacy, his unwavering commitment to himself. Perhaps what made him disappear was not his lack of talent, but his courage to refuse to compromise. And sometimes, in a world that loves to lie, a person who lives authentically is the most annoying thing to others. But he lived that way, quietly, fiercely, and never apologized for being himself. 18. Baby Washington, a voice that fades into nothingness like the morning mist. When that voice sang, people said that time seemed to slow down. Baby Washington, the sweet and sad female singer of the 60s, once soothed even the most hardened hearts with ballads like "That's How Heartaches Are Made" and "Only Those in Love." She was known as the uncrowned queen of New York soul music, but despite recording for major labels, Baby Washington never achieved stardom. Her career was long, but not groundbreaking. And then one day, the name disappeared. Baby Washington did not disappear because of scandal or illness. She disappeared like the wind, when soul music was overtaken by disco, when radio stations stopped playing slow, quiet, dark songs. Her name faded with it. She was not invited back. No one reissued her albums. She was no longer mentioned at award shows. At times, audiences mistakenly thought she had died, but she was still alive, just not in the entertainment world anymore. An eyewitness who met Baby Washington in the late 1980s said she worked in a hair salon in Queens. When he realized that the woman was the legendary singer, he was speechless. She was still gentle, still polite, and when asked why she didn't return to the stage, Baby Washington simply smiled, "I've sung enough, people just don't remember." There was no anger, no blame, just the mature letting go of someone who once poured her heart into music. No one knows exactly when Baby Washington last sang in public. Maybe it was at a family party or in church, but those who heard her sing can't forget. And it's that obscurity that, strangely, makes her memorable. Not all legends need the spotlight. Some quietly retreat, not because they fail, but because they know when to stop. We often remember those who make the loudest noise, but sometimes it's those who retreat quietly who leave the deepest void. And if someone ever made you speechless with just one line, please don't let them disappear from your memory, because everyone deserves to be remembered, especially those who sang with all their heart. 17. Sam Moore, the voice trapped in its own shadow. He was one half of the duo Sam and Dave, dubbed Soul Man by American audiences throughout the 1960s, with hits like "Hold On," "I'm Comin'," and "Soul Man." Sam Moore and Dave Prater delivered explosive performances, seamlessly combining fiery vocals and fiery stage presence. But when the lights went out and Dave died, Sam Moore was left alone. No more duet partners, no more familiar arrangements, and he embarked on a solo career like a disarmed warrior, alone, out of breath, and slowly fading from the public radar. After 1988, when Dave Prater died in a car accident, Sam Moore tried to keep his career alive by performing old songs at small events. But he quickly realized the heartbreaking truth: no one came to hear Sam Moore. They came to remember Sam and Dave. His voice was still strong, still burning the house, but there was no one left to sing a duet. The audience applauded, but their gaze was always half empty, and Sam knew he could not replace himself. The last time Sam Moore performed in public was at a memorial service for dead musicians in Detroit. He was asked to sing "When Something Is Wrong with My Baby," the song that had made America cry. But when he got on stage, he could only sing a few lines. He stopped. His voice was choked. He whispered into the microphone, "I sang this song with someone, and now there is no one to sing it with." The house was silent, not a sound, an artist standing in the crowd, but lost as if in an abandoned church. Sam Moore was still alive, but his musical career had stopped long ago. Not because he was bad, because half his soul was gone, and a solo career was never what he wanted. What he wanted was to share the spotlight, to sing with someone who believed in him, as he had done before. Sometimes, too much success can become a prison, and there are voices that, without a companion, cannot sing fully anymore. We often admire those who stand out alone, but please do not forget, some legends only shine when they are loved together. And if you have ever sung with someone, lived with someone, remember not to let that person fall into oblivion, because no one should sing a duet alone. 16. Ruby Johnson, a gem buried before it shines. Ruby Johnson was once considered one of the most powerful female voices Stax Records ever owned, but her career was a series of missteps, late opportunities, and recordings that were never widely released. She grew up in a time when black women, no matter how talented, were considered second-rate after the established names, though she was recognized as gold in the rough by top producers. Ruby never got the chance to become the sparkling diamond she deserved. Ruby recorded soulful songs, with delicate handling and a voice like a bell. I'll Run Your Hurt Away was considered a forgotten masterpiece, but the record labels kept postponing the release date. Radio stations didn't want to play songs that were too sad. Ruby didn't have a sexy image to sell album covers, and each of her demos was stuck in the record company's archives, as if her existence were just a slight blip in the history of R&B. A witness who met Ruby in 1990 said she lived in North Carolina, working as a receptionist at a school. When they learned that the woman with the gentle smile had once been a singer at Stax Records, they were stunned. "I still sing at night, in the bathroom," Ruby said. "The sound is pretty good." There was no bitterness, no demand for justice, just a woman who had big dreams, then learned to live small in a world that didn't have room for her. Ruby Johnson died in 1999 without a big tribute, without a memorial concert. But those who heard her sing will never forget that tone, a gentleness, but a harshness at the climax like a scratch on the heart. She didn't have time to be famous. But that doesn't mean she was bad. She just wasn't seen. In a world where the spotlight only shines on those who have the opportunity, how many more Ruby Johnsons are left in the dark? And if one day you hear a voice that makes your heart slow down, stop and listen. Because maybe there's a gem waiting to be discovered. Not everyone who disappears does so because they want to. Sometimes, the world never really opened its doors to them. 15. Chuck Jackson, R&B's autumn lover, left behind by time. Chuck Jackson was once hailed as one of the most refined R&B vocalists of the 60s. He had a refined style, a smooth voice, and the ability to convey deep emotions through each verse. The song Any Day Now became an immortal love song and made him a star. But fate was ironic. Although he was the first to perform, many generations after him only knew the cover version of White Singers. Chuck's achievements were gradually overshadowed, robbed of the halo by those who came after him but were favored by the promotion system. Chuck kept trying. He continued to record, continued to perform, but his name no longer appeared on the charts. Many record labels refused to release new songs. He was not rebellious, not noisy. He just quietly walked backstage, leaving the spotlight for younger, more fashionable people. It is said that in the late 1980s, he attended an R&B tribute show but was mistaken for a stagehand. He smiled slightly, not reacting. When people realized it was Chuck Jackson, they were embarrassed, but he just said, "I'm not here to be recognized. I'm here to listen to the music." The last time he stood on stage was at a Luther Vandross tribute concert. When he sang Any Day Now, he stopped mid-sentence. "I've waited my whole life for that day to come. The day when people remember who sang it first," he said. The audience was silent. No one spoke. An artist who had been a pioneer, now asking for one simple thing: recognition. Chuck Jackson died in 2023 as quietly as he had lived for so many years. No crowds, no media frenzy, but for those who still remember the 60s, he remains the autumn lover of R&B, not flashy but warm and deep. Remember, there are people who are born not to cause scandal, but to sow in people's hearts a gentle emotion that is not easy to name, and if they disappear, it is not their fault. It is the fault of a world that often forgets the value of kindness. 14. Gene Chandler, the Prince, sitting silently on the old throne. Gene Chandler once made the whole of America hum the melody of Duke of Earl, the hit that dominated the charts in 1962 and earned him the nickname The Duke. He climbed to the top very quickly with a luxurious appearance, sparkling robes, a golden cane, and a crown on his head. Gene was not just a singer, he was an icon, but then times changed. Music entered a new era. Classic songs were considered outdated, and from the position of an R&B king, Gene gradually receded into memory. He refused to stop. Gene tried to turn to funk, experimented with disco, and opened his own production company, but no one wanted to invest in a Duke of the previous decade. Despite his talent and strategy, he still could not swim against the tide of taste. Many artists later achieved fame thanks to the style that Gene had pioneered, but his name was not mentioned. A legend turned into a small footnote in the history of music. A journalist once recalled the last time he saw Gene Chandler was at a music party in Chicago. He arrived very early, wearing a light gray suit, no crown, no cape. He stood in the corner of the room, quietly watching the young artists perform. When asked why he did not sing a verse, he smiled sadly. "I have sung that song thousands of times, but now I just want to hear if people still remember the rhythm. No blame, no regrets, just an old king sitting on his old throne, watching the world go by." Gene Chandler didn't disappear. He just chose to step back, to keep his memory from being tainted by scandal. Perhaps the noblest thing an artist can do is to know when to step down from the stage, with his pride intact. And maybe, if one day you hear the melody of Duke of Earl somewhere, stop for a minute, because there are songs, like People, that deserve to be bowed down to respectfully, not because they are loud, but because they were once the height of elegance. You're halfway there, and if you're still here, you're not just an audience, you're a witness to the talents that were once erased from the spotlight. The stories that are coming will not be easy to hear, but they need to be told. Is this oblivion accidental, or a deliberate selection from a world that always favors voices from other skins? 13. Doris Troy, the woman the world looked at once and forgot forever. Doris Troy once made the whole of America pay attention with only one hit, Just One Look. The song sounded like a breath of fresh air in the period when soul was taking shape, making her name go from a studio singer to a bright star, but just like the name of the song. The public only looked at Doris once and then turned away. Her career after that was a series of small tours, supporting roles for bigger artists, and recordings that were delayed for unknown reasons. She collaborated with the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, but her name was never at the forefront. One night in the late 90s, at a soul music meeting in Brooklyn, Doris stepped on stage. She was not formally introduced, and there was no separate light. When she sang Just One Look again, a young audience member whispered, "Who is she?" An old artist next to her replied she was the one who paved the way for a whole generation of female singers, but no one remembers her name. After that night, Doris did not perform much. She lived quietly, teaching music in the church. When she passed away in 2004, only a few small news stories were published, but for those who heard her voice, the name Doris Troy is still a gentle cut in their memories. Some people are born to shine only once, but one true time is sometimes enough to change a whole genre of music. If society quietly extinguishes them, then we must rekindle them with our memories. No one deserves to be forgotten for living true to their talent. 12. Maxine Brown, the star erased before she could shine. Maxine Brown was once the main female vocalist of Scepter Records, the record label that made Dionne Warwick successful. She possesses a rich, soulful voice and skillful technique, with hits like All in My Mind or Funny. Maxine was predicted to become one of the top R&B divas, but then she was not invested in like her colleagues, did not have a strong promotional campaign, and was gradually pushed into a supporting role. The media called her the foundation for others to step up, but no one turned back to thank her for that. In 1985, at a music festival in New Jersey, Maxine made a surprise appearance at the end of the program. She was no longer the proud appearance of the past, just a simple woman with experienced eyes. When she started singing, the older audience immediately recognized her, but the younger crowd whispered to each other, "Who is she?" after the performance. A girl approached to ask for a photo. Maxine said, "You don't need to know who I am. Just know that I used to sing for people like your mother." That sentence was like a sad wish for her career. Maxine Brown lived many years, seeing many of her colleagues honored while her name was still left out, but she did not complain. She said, "I sang with all my heart. That was enough. Not everyone needs a monument. Some people just need to be remembered at the right time, as a belated thank you from life." 11. Harold Melvin, the founder of the band, but the first to be forgotten. Harold Melvin was the founder of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, one of the most famous soul groups of the 70s. But ironically, he was not the lead singer. That position went to Teddy Pendergrass, and as Teddy rose to fame, Harold's name gradually faded from the audience's mind. More and more, people called the group Teddy's Band, forgetting that without Harold, the band would not exist. Harold was not jealous. He once said, "I don't need to be in the middle of the stage. I just want to keep the band together." But when the group broke up and Teddy went solo, Harold returned to small stages, weddings, and community events. His last appearance was at a charity gala for a hospital in Philadelphia. After a brief performance, an audience member approached him and asked, "Who are you?" Singing like the old band, Harold simply smiled and said, "You're the old band, kid." Harold Melvin died in 1997. The media coverage was minimal. But to those in the business, he was the man who created a golden era. And perhaps the most painful thing is not to be unrecognized, but to be renamed by the band you created. A kind world would not let that happen, but if it did, at least we, those of us who still remember, can call him by his right name one more time. Harold Melvin, founder, leader, first forgotten. 10. Major Lance, the fireman left in the cold. Major Lance was a beacon of Chicago's soul movement in the 1960s, with such stirring hits as The Monkey Time and His voice was the soul of a generation who loved dance music and live music, but as times changed and music became more lyrical and soulful, Major Lance was seen as too entertainment and out of fashion. Record labels turned their backs on him, radios stopped playing him, and he slipped from popular memory. A witness recounted that at a Georgia fair in 1993, Major Lance stood on a makeshift stage, performing for a few hundred people. After the last song, he walked to the back and whispered to the organizer, "I used to have to turn down hundreds of shows because I was booked. Now everyone is booked except me." He died shortly afterward of heart disease. No memorial shows were held, as if the fire that once burned Chicago had been quietly extinguished in the dark. Sometimes, a person does not disappear because of a lack of talent, but because the world does not know how to preserve what once made them shine. And perhaps the kindest thing is to not let someone who once brought joy be forgotten too easily. 9. William Bell, the storyteller who was never heard. William Bell was never a top name, but the love songs he wrote, like You Don't Miss Your Water or I Forgot to Be Your Lover, touched millions of hearts as a quiet and humble artist. He did not like noise, did not create scandals, and just let the lyrics speak. But that calmness made him overwhelmed by more vibrant, more photogenic voices. He gradually became the one behind, even though he was the one who wrote many hits for others. In 2000, at a Memphis Music Awards ceremony, William Bell was invited to sing a song. When he walked out, only a few people recognized him. After the performance, a young man approached and asked, "Did you write that song?" Bell smiled and gently replied, "I've lived in those lyrics longer than anyone." Then he quietly left before the ceremony ended. William Bell is still alive, but his peak years will never return. Perhaps the world has listened to his music a lot, but has never really listened to him. And sometimes, the kindest thing is to stop for a moment, to hear the whole story that has never been properly heard. 8. Solomon Burke, the king without a throne, without a court, without a monument. Solomon Burke is known as the king of rock and soul, a resounding, powerful voice, bringing gospel to every stage he walked on. But though he was revered by the experts, he never really entered the hearts of the general public like Ray Charles or Otis Redding, perhaps because he was too complicated, too outspoken, too big in both voice and personality. He held his funeral, sold his coffin, raised nearly 20 children, lived as a priest and an artist at the same time, too real in a world that preferred simpler images. Before his death, Solomon Burke performed in Amsterdam. The narrator said that he sat on a throne in the middle of the stage, did not finish a song, but each sentence he uttered silenced the audience. After the show, he boarded a plane and died as soon as he landed. He died like a king on the way to conquer the audience, but without a kingdom waiting for him. Not everyone needs a throne to be king, and perhaps it is kindest to remember them not for the recognition they received, but for the life they spent giving their souls to each note. 7. Percy Sledge, the man who loved so deeply he disappeared. When Percy Sledge sang When a Man Loves a Woman, it was more than a love song, it was a soulful sob. The song catapulted him to instant stardom, becoming one of the most enduring R&B songs of all time. But after that early triumph, he was forgotten. Subsequent records failed to match the success. New voices took over, and he was remembered as a one-song man, despite having a whole repertoire of forgotten songs. In the late 1990s, Percy appeared at a small event in Alabama. He walked on stage near the end of the show, sang just one song, and then turned away in silence. An eyewitness said that afterward, he sat alone in the parking lot, saying, "I still love music." But it seems like music has forgotten me. He wasn't angry, just sad. A kind of sadness that doesn't speak, that doesn't ask for anything. Percy Sledge is proof that the greatest love is sometimes unrequited, but he still sang his heart out until the end. And perhaps being kind is about continuing to give, even when no one is clapping for you anymore. 6. Irma Thomas, the queen who never left her town. Irma Thomas was once hailed as the queen of New Orleans soul, her soft southern voice bringing a rare gentleness to a vibrant and explosive musical period. She had hits like Time Is on My Side, later covered by the Rolling Stones and overshadowed by the original. She did not fight, did not sue, just continued to sing in her hometown as if nothing had happened. An audience member who met Irma at a small bar in the French Quarter said that she stood on a tiny stage. No lights, no promotion. Singing with a three-piece band. When the audience finished, "It's raining." The audience applauded loudly. She just bowed slightly, then said, "I don't need to leave New Orleans to be loved." But the whole of America never loved her enough. Irma did not disappear because of failure. She was forgotten because she refused to follow the market. And perhaps the most decent way to live is to maintain your identity, even when the world demands you change to survive. 5. Wilson Pickett, the rage machine who burned himself out. Wilson Pickett was one of the most powerful and explosive voices in R&B hits, like In the Midnight Hour and Mustang Sally rocked dance floors across America. But behind that passion was a torn man. He had a chaotic personal life, involved in violence, alcohol, and a series of scandals that caused his career to plummet. In 2004, at a charity concert, Pickett appeared with a haggard face, his eyes no longer burning like before. When he stepped on stage, he was slow, his voice hoarse, and his singing was off-key. An old friend recalled that he turned backstage after the show and whispered, "I'm not me anymore." 2 years later, he died quietly, without a parade, without an anthem, without a ceremony. Wilson Pickett is a living warning that talent is not enough. Fame can easily swallow up unhealed souls. But he left behind music that makes people unable to stand still. And perhaps kindness is learning to forgive for those who once made us dance, then stumble in the middle of our music. 4. Otis Clay, the missionary without a chart name. Otis Clay was a veteran artist, a giant of Southern soul and gospel. He rose from the church and brought soul to songs like Trying to Live My Life Without You, although he was nominated for a Grammy. Otis's name rarely appears on popular legend lists. People listen to his music but do not know who he is. In 2015, at a church in Chicago, he sang Precious, Precious at a memorial service for an old friend. After singing, he stood still, not leaving the stage, as if trying to send something unspoken. A year later, he died of heart failure. There was no grand ceremony. Otis Clay lived quietly, not chasing fame. Perhaps kindness is singing to the right people, in the right place, at the right time, even when the world can't hear you. 3. Carla Thomas, the uncrowned princess. Carla Thomas, the queen of Stax Records, was one of the youngest female singers to succeed in soul music, with hits like Gee Whiz and B.A.B.Y. She was an early icon of female R&B, but the light from newer names quickly overshadowed her. At a Memphis gig in the 90s, Carla opened the night but was not named on the poster. After the performance, a middle-aged audience member said, "I used to play her records every night, and now I have to ask who she is." Carla left the entertainment industry and chose to teach music to local children. Some people don't want to fight for fame, they just want to sing. Sometimes the kindest thing is to know when to step back and stay true to yourself. 2. Linda Jones, Angel Called Home Too Soon. Linda Jones had a rare voice, powerful, emotional, and haunting. Her song Hypnotized is a broken love song that is etched in the memories of music lovers. But her career only lasted a few years. Linda died at the age of 27 from complications of diabetes after a gig. She was last seen at a New York radio station where she was promoting her new album. She sat silently in front of the microphone, as if listening to time pass in her head, recalled an employee. Linda left with so much unsaid. Some people are born to touch the deepest part of others' hearts, then disappear like the wind. The kindest thing is to listen while they are still singing. 1. Donny Hathaway, the genius who no one knows how to heal. Donny Hathaway was a musical genius who brought gospel soul to every philosophical soul song. With songs like A Song for You or Someday We'll All Be Free, he became a voice of humanity in a chaotic time. But he also lived with schizophrenia, paranoia, and pain before his death. Donny was seen alone in the lobby of the Essex House Hotel, telling himself that someone was watching. Hours later, he fell from the 15th floor. People called it a suicide, but those close to him still believe he did not mean it. Donny did not disappear. He was torn between light and darkness. And the last kind thing we can do is learn to understand, because sometimes a great soul does not need fame, just to be safe in its inner world. The voices that healed the wounds of an entire generation did not receive the recognition they deserved, but they did not disappear. They live on in every heart that remembers, every eye that listens. Let's pass on these stories as a beautiful act, so that good music is never abandoned. Thank you for joining us on this journey to remember 23 forgotten legends. If you feel this is worth preserving, don't hesitate to like and share to spread those precious memories. And comment on the name of an artist from the list that you still carry in your heart, so they never disappear again.